I'm Jack Kennedy, and we're here to bring you the latest in MMA.
Hey everybody, my name's Hunter Boss, and what the boss says goes.
What is up everyone, my name is Keelan McNamara, and you already know what time it is.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the MMA Island Podcast. I am Jack Kennedy alongside Keelan McNamara and Hunter Boss. Well, guys, we finally have fights again this Saturday. It's a good one, Sean Strickland versus Jack Hermansson. Good fight night, solid fight night. But with that, let's get into the news. Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson. We had mentioned it a little bit last episode, but now we're finally talking about it. This fight has been officially booked, I think. It's going to be amazing. Hunter, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
It's going to be insanity. Are you kidding me? This is like my favorite fight that's been confirmed this year so far. Like, this is going to be bloody. That's the word I'm going to use here. It's going to be bloody no matter what happens in this fight. Tony Ferguson's going to cut up Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler might cut up Tony Ferguson. This fight's going to be insane. These are two of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC or even in the respected weight division of lightweight. Ever since Michael Chandler has joined the UFC, there's only been good fights out of this guy. I love watching Michael Chandler. He's fastly becoming one of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC currently. And we're talking about one of the newest entertaining fighters against one of the oldest entertaining fighters of Tony Ferguson here. Tony Ferguson, El Kukui, he is the man. He's the boogeyman. This guy puts people to sleep. This guy used to have a 7-year unbeaten streak. He was winning fights left and right. 11 fight. He was supposed to have the legendary legendary fight with Khabib. Never got confirmed, sadly. So things started going downhill for Tony Ferguson. But finally, we don't have a pure grappler going against Tony Ferguson. I've been asking for this one for a long time. I've been wanting, please, Dana White, please don't put Tony Ferguson against another Beneil Dariush or Islam Makhachev or any of those really pure wrestlers. I want to see him brawl. I want to see him get bloody. I want to see him fight like he fought against Justin Gaethje. Not lose necessarily, but still put up a fight and have an entertaining fight nonetheless. I mean, this guy's crazy. Both guys are a lot of fun to watch. If I were to give a title to this, these are two of the most entertaining fighters in the lightweight division currently, as opposed to not Conor McGregor. You know, I think DP is going to move up. Dustin Poirier is going up to welterweight in my eyes. What's that leave us with? Two of the most entertaining fighters of Chandler and Tony Ferguson. And if Tony Ferguson scores a win, he's back in the top ranks. He's being back in the talks of fighting those top level fighters. So it's going to be a fantastic fight either way.
Yeah, guys, don't underestimate how much Hunter's asked for this fight, because he's been asking for it for time now. I mean, just to kick it off there, because it is very true. No, this is a brilliant fight. This is a brilliant fight. This is a fan's fantasy fight. And I think, Jack, you're actually correct. If it hasn't been officially confirmed, I have seen a couple of interviews where Dana White has said this is the fight that they're making. So generally when Dana says that, you know something's about to happen. So as far as I'm concerned at the moment, I'm going to take it that the fight is happening and that it's very near to being confirmed, if not already. What a fight it is, though. You know, there really is no other way of describing it. These are two of the most entertaining fighters in any weight class colliding in the middle of the octagon for, I'm assuming it would be 5 rounds. 5 rounds of madness with these two guys is just the best thing you can ask for. In my opinion, it should be just as good, if not better, than the Gaethje-Chandler fight, because we'd have 10 more minutes and one more guy who's just as crazy as Justin Gaethje. And I really like the point that Hunter made. You know, Tony Ferguson has had a real bad luck of the draw recently, because he's had Justin Gaethje, the most violent man in any weight class, in my opinion. Then he had Charles Oliveira, the current champion, who is just an anaconda when it comes to any aspect of the ground game. You know, absolutely beat on Tony Ferguson when they fought. And then he had Beneil Dariush, again, who completely out-grappled him, which sucks. So it's brilliant to see a very fan-friendly fighter fighting Tony. Like Hunter said, I think you phrased it very, very well. A guy who is not grappling heavy, has the pedigree, but never uses it. A bit like Justin Gaethje, actually. So this does play more into Tony Ferguson's wheelhouse inherently, just on that fact alone. Look, I can't give any predictions at this point because it's way too early, but be under no illusion at all. I am so, so excited for this fight. And if Tony Ferguson manages to pull off a win, he is back in the title picture. And I mean that very seriously. He's had a very, very unlucky time of it for the last year or two, I would say. But if he manages to pull off a win over Michael Chandler, he's back in that top five and he's back within that narrative and he's back within the conversation. And trust me, there's nothing I want to see more than Tony Ferguson at a title fight press conference. It's where he belongs. So yeah, Jack, I'm really intrigued to hear what you have to say, but be under no illusion, I am hyped.
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys. I think this is, of all matchups they could possibly make, perfect for both guys. I really think so. We've been talking about how great it is for Tony Ferguson, but look at what Michael Chandler has had to go through. He's getting through Dan Hooker, right? Immediately to a title shot against Charles Oliveira. And then after that, who's he fight? The human highlight reel, Justin Gaethje, right? Those three fights are ridiculous to enter into your UFC career. It's insane. And Michael Chandler in every single one of those has been competitive, if not been winning up into some points, especially the Oliveira fight. He could have been champion. I don't know if you guys have seen like what if posts and stuff like that, but it's so true. Michael Chandler was so close to beating Charles Oliveira. And what if he beats Charles Oliveira? We're looking at a whole nother division right now. So look, Michael Chandler is absolutely top tier. And after all the murderous row he's been through, he's facing another guy who is that tough and Tony Ferguson, but a guy who hasn't been winning necessarily recently. You look at the other hand, like Tony Ferguson, he got lit up by Justin Gaethje, and there's no shame in that because this new version of Justin Gaethje training with Trevor Whitman is one of the best, and a lot of people are picking him over Charles Oliveira. But by the way, what a crazy matchup that is, right? Oliveira Gaethje, that's insane. No shame in losing to him. There's no shame in losing to Charles Oliveira. Beneil Dariush, I didn't see that one coming. Beneil Dariush is legit now too. But two grapplers and one Justin Gaethje, pretty much. And you have now he's facing a guy in Michael Chandler who has ridiculous power. But the problem with Tony Ferguson has never been about his chin. He can take shots from the best of them and keep going forward, which is what makes this fight so good because he can go forward. What makes Gaethje different than Chandler is Gaethje has ridiculous power, but he just throws an accumulation of everything. The leg kicks slows you down, the jabs, the hooks, everything. Chandler is solely really, he throws a lot and he's a phenomenal fighter and can mix in the wrestling, which is something I know we're kind of overlooking a little bit, but he is a phenomenal wrestler and could use this in this fight. But yeah, he's mainly a power guy. He mainly just loads up for his shots and it works most of the time. However, Tony Ferguson, we haven't really seen power work against Tony Ferguson because he just eats it and goes forward. So that's what makes it a good fight. This is one I'm not going to make none of us are going to make an official prediction for it because it's like not even technically official yet, I think. That being said, as much as I love this fight for Tony Ferguson, I think Chandler's, the way he's been fighting recently, I think this is a good matchup for Michael Chandler. I think he's going to be able to use a lot of his strength and his experience he's had in the UFC now. And then my biggest thing is too, we look at Tony Ferguson getting dominated on the ground by these guys, Makhachev, right? There's absolutely no shame. Or he didn't fight, my bad. I mean, Charles Oliveira, right? There's absolutely no shame in losing on the ground to Charles Oliveira or Beneil Dariush. However, he really, really had nothing going on the ground in those fights at all. I think a lot of Tony Ferguson, he's been my big thing. I say this like once every 3 podcasts. Fight age for me is everything. And Tony Ferguson has been fighting for a long time now in the UFC and other organizations. He has a lot of fight experience. And I don't know. I think there's something about that Justin Gaethje fight that just took a little something out of Tony Ferguson. Because beforehand, in these scrambles, he was known for being the king of the scrambles. Like, no one could hold him down on the ground, no matter who you are. He faced some elite wrestlers. Like, whenever Kevin Lee fought him, right? Kevin Lee made it, took him down. But Kevin Lee looked helpless whenever he was actually on the ground with Tony Ferguson, right? I think that I just, as much as I love Tony, we all love Tony Ferguson, right? Tony Ferguson is one of the best. El Kukui, oh my gosh, I love him. But I think Chandler, is more in his prime right now and more just in every fight. than I think Tony Ferguson is. I just think there's something a little bit out of it. However, if there's any fight where Tony Ferguson has a chance in, and I think it's going to be a guaranteed banger, I think Tony Ferguson, this is a perfect fight for him, and it's going to be a good fight. Early, ridiculously early, not even a prediction, but just a foresight. I lean a little bit towards Chandler right now.
You'd be stupid not to lean towards Chandler, honestly. We've seen what Chandler can do in the octagon lately. He's looking on fire.
Yeah.
I mean, when we saw Tony Ferguson lose, we saw a bit of the wind go from his sails. He doesn't seem as motivated, and when he loses, he keeps talking about the excuses of when he. This is the crazy part. When he fought Charles Oliveira and he lost, during the interview afterwards, he goes, "Yeah, I only trained like 1 or 2 days of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu." Come on, man. Like, if you're gonna face one of the greatest submission artists of all time, and you have 1 or 2 days of submission practice under you, I mean, it just doesn't seem like he's taking it seriously anymore. But for a fighter to take a fight seriously, you're going to have to against Michael Chandler. I mean, Iron Mike is insane.
Yeah.
But this is the fighter I feel like Tony Ferguson excels against. This is the fighter that he wants to fight against. He wants those fighters that can wrestle. He wants those fighters who can strike. I mean, I think a lot back to Kevin Lee here, like Jack said. He was a big striker, but he had that wrestling to fall back on as well, too. Chandler's very similar, too. He likes to stand up. He likes to strike. But, of course, he has that wrestling in the back pocket in case he needs it. Though it's not, like, the best wrestling in the UFC, I would say. I think it's good wrestling, and I think it's very good against those chumps. But when it comes to those top 5s and top 10s, the wrestling of Michael Chandler is a little bit stagnant. I don't want to say it's bad, but it's just it's about average, I want to say. It's not like I hate to say it this way, but it doesn't stand out. That's what the best way to put it. It does not stand out. It's there simply just to be there, just in case he goes to the ground. Tony Ferguson on his back is usually fantastic. Before his last 3 losses, I mean, he was fantastic on his back. I mean, he would go for those triangle chokes. He submitted people with Darce chokes constantly. Yeah. I mean, this man was a submission wizard too. Tony Ferguson, trained by Eddie Bravo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master. I mean, so many fantastic submissions that Tony Ferguson has had. This fight's just going to be bananas. I want to give like a little unofficial prediction, but I can't. I mean, every scenario I see, I'm like, well, if Chandler takes him to the ground, then Tony Ferguson can do this. But if Tony Ferguson stands up and bangs, and then Michael Chandler can hit him with this shot. But I'm not going to give any official prediction yet, but I will agree that I'm leaning a little bit towards Chandler here.
Yeah, look, that's a very fair prediction. And as you guys both said, no one would openly go against it because it wouldn't make sense to. The one area of this fight where Tony Ferguson has the clearest advantage, because I think Michael Chandler has the advantage in many other areas of this fight. The one thing that will win or lose this fight for Tony Ferguson is his movement. Yeah. Tony Ferguson's foot movement is some of the best that I've ever seen. In fact, I put it up there with like the Anderson Silvas. That's the level that we're talking about. I really, really do think so. I would put it up there with the likes of Lomachenko in boxing. You know, that sort of ability to move side to side and get in and get out and just use angles so perfectly. I don't think his footwork is as clean as Lomachenko's, but I think it's effective. And that's where Tony Ferguson has always tried to being effective and getting the job done so well. And the other thing that Tony Ferguson really has as well is that he can cut you up. You know, Tony Ferguson has to come correct against Michael Chandler or he'll get his head blown off his shoulders. There's no argument otherwise. But Chandler really has to come correct here as well, because Tony Ferguson doesn't punch as hard as Michael Chandler, and he doesn't strike as traditionally as Michael Chandler. But Tony Ferguson can definitely do more damage than Michael Chandler. And the other thing with Michael Chandler too is this: if say Chandler gets a knockdown or Chandler takes down to the ground, Chandler cannot leave himself exposed, because Ferguson will slice him up from the ground as well. He's always been very good at that. He can throw elbows from any angle. If he's on top, you really don't want to be there, because you will be lying in a pool of your own blood if you aren't careful. You know, the examples of this are countless. I can't even get into all of them right now. So look, all the advantages and all the signposts point to Chandler winning if this fight does happen. Obviously, it's way too early to say, and I'm not going to definitively say one way or the other. But don't count Tony Ferguson out of it either by any means. I mean, El Kukui is mythical in power. I do genuinely believe that. And if Tony Ferguson comes correct, if he trains and if he puts his best foot forward, I see no reason why he can't get the job done. You know, he is, I think he still has the longest winning streak at lightweight, perhaps of all time, with that legendary 11-fight win run.
Well, except for Khabib, right?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Except for Khabib, you know, you don't get an 11-fight winning streak for nothing. And Tony Ferguson is more than capable of tapping into that El Kukui beast mode at any time. If he comes correct and if he gets the job done, El Kukui has every chance in the world. But Michael Chandler will like this fight too.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you guys said. I mean, I think the keys for Tony Ferguson for sure are the movement and really just being unpredictable, just going back to just what the vintage Tony Ferguson is. I think this is a fight where he needs to be loose. He needs to take risks. He needs to throw elbows, knees, all sorts of wild stuff, because I think that is what he needs to get back to doing. And honestly, who knows? Like, if there is a fight where he could do it, this is the fight to do it. The other thing I wanted to touch on real quick before we move on, and this is just not necessarily relating to the fight itself, but just to like the caliber of the UFC roster. Something that Hunter touched on, I think it's a phenomenal point and fascinating, about Michael Chandler's wrestling, right? Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje are very similar, right? Their base is actually in wrestling. So they started in wrestling, they wrestled in college. So they're actually both phenomenal wrestlers, which led to that amazing scramble we got in their fight, right? That was incredible. So they're actually both top tier wrestlers, but the difference was, though, in Bellator, right? That's what Michael Chandler was known for, right? He was known for being a stand-up guy, but also being able to use his wrestling to dominate his opponents, right?
Benson Henderson.
But exactly. But you go into the UFC now, right? And it's just the caliber of guys who you wouldn't even necessarily think would have that good of wrestling, but are able to not necessarily neutralize it, but like not make it near as effective, not make it a fight deciding tool as it was in Bellator. In Bellator, that was a fight deciding tool. But Michael Chandler could dominate you on the feet, knock you out, and then he can also go and take you down and just drown you, which he did in, different fights. And the UFC now, I mean, it's just filled with those guys. And that top 500 you touched on, you nailed it, right? We're looking at this and we're like, oh, Michael Chandler, he's kind of just like an average wrestler. Michael Chandler is an all-American wrestler. And it shows it. And he absolutely, I personally think he can use that wrestling against Tony Ferguson. But when we're looking at it from the broad, perspective, in the top 5 of that division, who's it going to work at? But Neil Dariush would probably equal it. Makhachev would for sure equal it. We've seen Oliveira be able to equal it. We've seen Gaethje be able to equal it as well. And then Chandler's 5. So, like, it's just crazy. And this is an aside, not related to anything, but just the caliber of the UFC relating to other organizations is insane, especially when you consider a tool like the wrestling that Michael Chandler has. I don't know. I thought it was just fascinating because he is such a good wrestler. I wanted to just give Michael Chandler some props for that, but also everybody else in that division of props. Anyways, I guess that's a good segue to our next segment, right? Best of the best time. And now we're talking, right? Because this past week, this coming week, we have fights this Saturday, right? But this past week, we didn't have any UFC fights, but we had every other organization except for the PFL going on. So let's talk about, for 2022, which organization outside of the UFC do you guys think will have the biggest year? Hunter, what do you think?
This is a tough one, honestly, because the UFC grew a lot last year. Like, huge numbers increase.
Yeah.
Very, very big increase for the UFC. But with an increase for the UFC, it also increases those smaller corporations like PFL, bare knuckle boxing, Bellator, all of those different fighting combat organizations. But who I think will have the best year, I'm going to go with bare knuckle boxing. I think bare knuckle boxing is going to have such an increase in numbers that it's going to be like a Bellator will definitely have a great year. PFL will have a great year, but I think bare knuckle boxing will like nearly double their viewers this year because of the introduction of Chad Mendez and Mike Perry. Those are 2 huge names to have on their roster, and they have them. They're coming up in their fights. Julian Lane, we had him on the podcast not too long ago. He's going to be fighting Platinum Mike Perry, and that is a huge fight, and people want to see that. They're doing Bare Knuckle Mania 2 coming up soon. I think bare knuckle boxing has it. I mean, bare knuckle boxing has the entertainment factor. they're fast fights, so you don't get bored in any part. There's not much wrestling, and a lot of casual UFC fans will say like they don't like the wrestling when it comes to UFC. So if you don't like the wrestling, go watch some bare knuckle boxing or go watch some boxing. Here it is right here. Mike Perry's going to give you a show. Julian Lane's going to give you a show. Chad Mendes. Oh, he'll definitely put on a show. Can I just say, I'm so excited to see Chad Mendes.
That's awesome, again. Right? Yeah.
It's so much fun to watch. And if you take a look at his UFC career, he's only lost to champions. So what is he going to do in bare knuckle boxing? Hopefully some big stuff. So
he's also juiced up too. Have you seen him? He's totally juiced up right now and everything.
Yeah,
too.
Probably.
Like, I love it. That's fine. Go for it.
It totally is, dude. Yeah. He always looks like he is. And he got suspended for being juiced up. So, it makes sense. But, I'm going to say bare knuckle boxing is going to be the new big corporation come 2022.
Hunter, I like that shout. I like where your head's at with this. I like this left field thinking. I really do. Look, there's a lot of different answers here, and it's very hard to say that one could be wrong unless you go so far left field, you end up outside the realm of reality. I think Bellator's going to have a big 2022 because hopefully, God willing, COVID might be coming to its end, which of course we all hope is the case. I know they have a big London card coming up at some point, and they've got a big Dublin card coming up at another point as well, which will be great for everybody. I think One Championship will continue to grow really well in Asia. I think some of the stuff they're doing is fantastic, and I give them all the props in the world. But I'm going to go a tiny bit left field, and I'm going to say Cage Warriors.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I like Cage Warriors. I'm a big fan of what they're doing. They're very fan interactive, and they're just a very well-run organization. And, I just want to give a quick shout out here of sorts to Graham Boylan, the president of Cage Warriors. He put out a tweet, I think, late last week, Thursday or Friday, and the card that's coming to London for the UFC early this year, I think he said he was able to count something like 8 former Cage Warriors champions on that card. I could be wrong, but it's somewhere around the number 8. And the point there is that, for Europe, Cage Warriors is the undisputed supply chain to the UFC. Conor McGregor was a 2-weight Cage Warriors world champion. Paddy Pimblett was a 2-weight Cage Warriors world champion, and many, many more beyond that list too. So I think the big players are going to continue to have big years. But if I had to pick one who's slightly less predictable, I'll go in there with Cage Warriors.
I love that. I would say totally like 85% of European fighters in the UFC came from Cage Warriors, and you always see the highlights from it and everything. It's a phenomenal organization to watch. I love it. So as far as who I think will have statistically the best 2022, I think it'll be Bellator, right? We have like the rankings like UFC Bellator One Championship from there on. And I think the ratings will follow that still. So I think Bellator will, statistically have the best 2022. However, I'm going to go with Eagle FC, right? Habib's organization.
Oh, that's a good one.
All right.
Forgot about that.
Right. So I think I don't think bare knuckle boxing as much as I think all of these other organizations, their stocks are going to go up. However, I think ratings wise, right, Bellator is going to be still second. However, my pick for whose ratings will rise the most and who will get the most promotion jump up in the rankings a lot as far as promotional stuff, I really think it's Habib's organization. The amount of promotion their first US show got was insane. I watched it. A lot of people, I didn't watch the main card, but I watched the prelims for it. And like a lot of people watched it, and it was a phenomenal show. Habib is learning how to do it, but he's getting some good names in there. And honestly, more than, at least for me, and a lot more, I guess, casual fans will go in and watch. I want to see some names there. But for me, I love to see these Russian prospects going at it. That's why I love to watch Eagle FC, because we've seen the whole Russian takeover of the UFC recently with all of these other guys. Like we just saw Saeed Nurmagomedov do like 40 seconds against Cody Stamann, make it look easy. I love to see those guys going out there and becoming sharper and sharper and sharper and UFC ready in that organization. And it's just so fun. There's so much hype behind it. I think it's a polished organization that has so much room to grow. It's run by one of the best UFC fighters to ever do it. It's getting respect from other fighters coming over. And I think they're doing a great job. So I'm going to go with Eagle FC. I think they're going to keep their stock's going to keep rising. They got some great fighters. I mean, they got Kevin Lee on the roster. Diego, I think he's going to be fighting Diego Sanchez, which is a crazy fight, actually. So look, I love what they're doing. It's just the fights are fun to watch. There was not a bad fight on that last card that they did, their first US show, and that so many people were talking about it. The stock's gonna continue to rise, it's gonna get coverage. So yeah, that'll be my I'll do Eagle FC as my promotion to look out for 2022. Although I do think Bellator will, have the best ratings out of the rest, like usual. They might have to look out for 2023 or 2024 though, because I'd say any of three of ours could continue to rise. I love Cage Warriors. Bare knuckle boxing, I think, has so much potential growth with the fighters that they're bringing in. I really think I love Cage Warriors so much, but if I'm talking about potential to grow, I think bare knuckle boxing and Eagle FC have the most potential to skyrocket because they're so relatively young and they're getting new fighters in there. So lots of stuff to look out for, lots of great fights. And with that, let's move on to our discussion of the week. And we are talking Ryan Bader, who just got a win in Bellator, speaking of. This is a fascinating question and one we've had, as MMA fans collectively talked about a little bit, but we're going to discuss it right now. Had Ryan Bader stayed in the UFC, would he have challenged for the light heavyweight title? Hunter, what do you think?
I think yes. At one point, he might. He had a big feud with Daniel Cormier, one of the press conferences. I'm going to bring that up. Daniel Cormier basically just said, he wanted the easiest fight and he wanted Ryan Bader because that's the easiest fight. Super smart. Honestly, I love that line from Daniel Cormier. I think that'll be one of my favorite trash talking moments in the UFC. But I think just the animosity between the two and Ryan Bader's record speaks for itself. I mean, he beat Rashad Evans. And also, can I just say big congrats to Rashad Evans on the day?
Shout out Rashad.
Huge. He hadn't fought since 2013, and he went in there. He looked clean. I love Rashad Evans. I still do. He has some of the best knockouts in the UFC. We talk about Hall of Fame. Rashad Evans should be in there.
Hall of Fame. Yeah.
But anyways, back to the topic. Ryan Bader, he's got a fantastic record. He beat Big Nog. He beat Rashad Evans. He's beaten a lot of other people in the UFC. And I think with those big wins, that would have gotten him the shot against Daniel Cormier. Do I think he would have won? Hell no. There's no that's not a debate. Daniel Cormier beats Ryan Bader every time. I think 9 times out of 10 until Daniel Cormier slips something in his back and then he gets hurt mid fight. But I love Ryan Bader. He's a lot of fun to watch. Big congrats this weekend. I think he would have had a title shot in the UFC if he stayed and kept winning a little bit more. I think he was on like a 2-fight win streak when he left the UFC. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like he's a bad fighter by any means, and he's definitely one of the best in the world. It's just not he's not the best, and I don't think he was ever the best at any point. So, Bader, fantastic job this weekend. Rashad Evans, fantastic job this weekend, and he would have fought for a title.
Yeah, I just want to start this off really quickly by going back to what we were talking about just beforehand and the promotional thing, because something just came to me. The fighter pay dispute is going to be very important in terms of how big any of these organizations can get. If it continues to go the way it's been going, a lot of these organizations will grow much bigger, much more quickly. But if fighters start getting paid more, then I'd watch out for that, because that is very interdependent in this whole thing. So that's just the point I was going to make. But on to Ryan Bader. I love this question because it's such an interesting question. But there's a problem for Ryan Bader fans, though. And the problem is this. Whenever a fighter leaves an organization and goes to another organization and becomes that organization's champion, we have a tendency to retrospectively rewrite history into an alternative timeline where things were the same when they were there and you're applying them being a champion now to when they weren't. And the problem is that if you take the same Ryan Bader in the UFC and you play that timeline through the whole way, I don't see him challenging for a title, if I'm totally honest. Don't get me wrong, I respect Ryan Bader a hell of a lot. I think the guy's an amazing fighter, and he's been a heavyweight and light heavyweight champion in Bellator, which is no easy feat by anybody's stretch of the imagination. The problem is that the UFC is the cream of the crop, no matter what division you're in. If you're at the top, you're at the very top. There is no argument about that. And when it comes to Ryan Bader, anytime he looked like he was approaching near the top, he couldn't get the job done. That's just the cold heart reality. I wish there was a nicer way of saying it, but unfortunately there just isn't. And, I think DC would have mauled him. I think Gustafson back then probably would have beat him too. I think John Jones, if he'd have stayed clean, would have beaten him 10 times out of 10 easily. So when you consider all these things, you have to ask yourself that question again. And we're not asking, could Ryan Bader beat the rest? Because Ryan Bader was one of the best of the rest. I very much give him that. But could he beat Cormier, Gustafson, and Jones? No. And that's just the truth. He just couldn't. And I think even if you put Ryan Bader in that division now, could he beat Jiri Prochazka? Could he beat Jan Blachowicz? At this point, I don't know if I see that happening. So with the greatest of will and respect in the world to Ryan Bader, and I congratulate him very much on his title retention on the weekend, do I think he would have fought for a title? No.
Yeah, look, you got me kind of thinking about it, right? If we're talking about Ryan Bader putting against him in the UFC now, forget the top two, right? I don't think he beats Glover Teixeira. I don't think he beats Yuri. I don't think he beats Jan. I don't think, like, let's skip a couple names, right? I don't think he beats Anthony Smith right now. I think Anthony Smith is a phenomenal talent. I would give Anthony Smith the edge in that fight. Ryan Bader is a phenomenal fighter. Let's go back to the timeline, right? We're doing like a multiverse of UFC, MMA, what we're doing right now, right? Here's what I think. I think Ryan Bader was a phenomenal fighter for his time. However, Keelan, what you said, I think you nailed it. He was the best of the rest. He just was in the right place at the right time. However, here's what I think. If he stayed in the UFC, I do think he would have challenged for the title. However, at a specific time, because of specific reasons, right? I don't think because of him necessarily beating everybody else and becoming the number one contender or number two contender. Here's what I think. And I think I'm going to win Keelan over with this argument right here, right? And I'm just going to say one name. Do you remember when Volkan Ozdemir challenged Daniel Cormier for the title?
Yes.
That is when Ryan. Exactly. That is when Ryan Bader would have fought Daniel Cormier for the titles. When Volkan Ozdemir fought Daniel Cormier for the title, because the rest of the weight class was so dried out. Because Gustafson had just fought him, Anthony Johnson had just fought him twice. Right after that second Anthony Johnson fight between Daniel Cormier, that is when Ryan Bader would have slipped right in and fought Daniel Cormier for the title. Would it have been closed? No. Would it have made out of the first round? Maybe. Not out of the second. That is when it would have happened. Whenever Volkan Ozdemir fought Daniel Cormier, that is the perfect time for Ryan Bader to slip in. So, in short, technically, yes, I think alongside the timeline. However, that being said, you still don't know if Ryan Bader keeps up the win streak, right? And the win streak has to be on a one-win fight in that scenario, right? Because the division was really dried up at that point. It was bad. But if, considering he didn't fall out and everything, because that would have been 2 years after he called out Daniel Cormier. So you'd have to wait a little bit. Can he keep winning up and down up until that point to remain in the conversation is a whole nother debate, because we don't know. The truth is we just don't know. That being said, I mean, theoretically, I think he could have. Would the fight have been competitive? No. And it's more of a thing. I think he would have got the title shot of being in the right place at the right time, as opposed to him being the best fighter. So to answer the question, I think technically yes, but just because we saw Volkan Ozdemir, who was ranked number 8, fight Daniel Cormier for the title. So I think we could have seen Ryan Bader fight him in that specific time period. If we're making a whole nother argument here, right? We're talking about just because why not? If we're talking about Bellator champions, we're talking about alternate timelines of fighters who I think could have actually challenged for a title or should have, or left the UFC too early or whatever. I think instead of talking about Ryan Bader right now, I think by far the guy who was on a run in the UFC is Gegard Mousasi. I think honestly, by the time he left Bellator and fought a couple fights, and this might just be me and you never know, but Michael Bisping was the champ then. I think Gegard Mousasi, if he'd stayed in the UFC, I think he could have been champion. I really think he could have been champion. Whenever Michael Bisping had beaten Luke Rockhold, if Michael Bisping, probably Dan Henderson. Remember, he got the title shot. Dan Henderson probably wouldn't get the title shot then because Gegard Mousasi was on a tear, and Bellator offered him more money, so he went to Bellator. And obviously, he's been the champion ever since over there. So I really think if you're going to make an argument for anybody in an organization, it personally for me wouldn't be Ryan Bader. Because for him, it's more of a right place, right time. If you're talking about best fighter in the world, I think Gegard Mousasi really, if he stayed in there, I could see him being champion in the UFC. A whole nother argument, but yeah.
If we're going along those lines, I'll throw in a name of Patricio Pitbull. I think at one time, I think he was the best featherweight on the planet. But I mean,
well, who would he beat though? Would you beat Aldo? Do you think?
I think he would beat Volkanovski at one point. I think when Volkanovski had just beaten Max Holloway, I'd say Pitbull might have been able to take it over.
Really?
That's bold.
Really?
It might be bold, but I think Patricio he's insane. I mean, that guy strike. And that guy had power
too, though.
Yeah, no, I'm not debating. I'm not saying that he isn't. I'm saying if I didn't know what I know right now, and I just saw Volkanovski beat Holloway for the title, I would think to myself, Pitbull might be able to beat
I could see that. I can see that.
That's what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
At one point, I would say Pitbull could have been the best in the world.
Off of that performance, yeah.
Right.
Sure. I can see that.
Right. But those some great points. And I just like to say, I mean, Ryan Bader, the argument that you provided, Jack, is the one that I would go with as well. At one point, I think since the weight division was so saturated of fighters to fight for the title, I think he would have gotten a title shot at one point. I don't think it would have been great. I mean, he already in his UFC career, he had already lost to Anthony Johnson. He had already lost to Glover Teixeira. He had already lost to Tito Ortiz. I mean, it speaks for itself. I mean, he loses to those big money fights, he'll beat the rest. I mean, the only really good people he beat were Rashad Evans and Big Nog. Big Nog were great fighters, but they were just past their time, and Bader beat them. So Bader's a great fighter. I think he would have got the title shot, but he just wouldn't have won.
Pretty much. Yeah, Jack, I gotta admit, I think you made an excellent case there. I give you full credit for that. And if we're working on the assumption of right place, right time, then I'm willing to agree with you both that Bader would have got the shot on that basis, yes. It wouldn't have been on being the number one contender, but it would have been on how thin the division was. Because back then, you're absolutely correct. That was like a dying tree, that division. It was that thin. And it's only really now we're seeing it come back to life. That's how thin it's been for that long. And yes, I absolutely agree with you. I don't think Bader makes it out of the first round against peak DC. I think DC would put him away quite easily, if I'm honest, but that's a different conversation. The one thing that I want to talk about before we move on is the Gegard Mousasi point, because I love that point. And I think if you ask us this question, but with Gegard Mousasi instead of Ryan Bader, I think we're having a very, very different conversation. Because Gegard was wrecking it in middleweight when he left. And like you said, to their immense credit, Bellator built Bellator mostly around Gegard Mousasi. They gave him the money he deserved and he left. But if you're asking me this question about Gegard Mousasi and whether he could have and would have gotten a title shot, I have no question that he would have. And I think, Jack, even further to your credit, you're exactly right in your timeline as well. I think it's replacing Dan Henderson for that fight in UFC London against Bisping. So just wanted to say, I think you've made a brilliant case there. And if this is the question we're asking, I'm fully with you on that.
Yeah, I think if we're talking Gegard Mousasi, we're not talking about if he gets the title shot. We're talking about if he wins the title shot. And as much as I love Michael Bisping, we're talking Gegard Mousasi. The guy is so well-rounded. I mean, whenever I was so lucky, I got to see him fight live. And the guy even today, right? We're not arguing today, of course, but the guy even today is so well-rounded and so well pieced together. But him in his, maybe not even, that probably might not even been his prime. His prime might have been before that, but he was so well-rounded in everything. And in that division, he was on a 2-fight win streak, but only because he got caught by that spinning side kick to the face by Uriah Hall. You remember that? And then he came back and beat Uriah Hall again and everything like that. So yeah, he is a fascinating point in UFC history because, he was on such a win streak. He's had so many fights and everything like that. But yeah, what are you thinking about?
I'm pretty sure that was the last time the UFC was in Belfast. That Gegard Mousasi Uriah Hall fight.
Really?
Yeah, and that was like 2000 and God, when was that around like 2012?
I think 13, right?
I think it was 13. That's the last time because Uriah Hall got that knockout. You're absolutely right. I forgot about that.
And it was
back
so
when Uriah
weird.
Hall was super good.
Yeah. And it was weird too because Mousasi was winning that fight, and then he just got caught with like a crazy strike. It's like that Renan Barão Eddie Wineland strike, right? Like he didn't mean to land it, but it just landed. And then a couple fights down the road, Gegard Mousasi won or got his revenge for that fight.
2016.
16.
Really?
Wow. I mean, it makes sense. Oh, that would make sense, right? Because that's when Michael Bisping became champ.
That's right.
He fought 3 times that year. That's crazy to think about. That's insane. Well, we're going down memory lane here. Fantastic fighters we're talking about. I love it, guys. Great podcast. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. As always, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at MMA.island. Check us out everywhere, literally everywhere, including iTunes and Spotify. And check out our website, MMAisland.net. Thank you again, everyone, so much for listening. Great podcast, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.